In Rainbows has maybe been talked about, without actually being talked about, more than any other record in the past decade. On October 10th, 2007, Radiohead released their 7th LP online, inviting listeners to pay whatever they wanted for the download. This was a record that was in high demand, so that approach, which showed an uncommon trust in the audience, became a story in itself, even if it wasn't entirely unprecedented. A side effect of the pay-what-you-want buzz is that the music itself lost out in the competition for column inches. I've had the experience of seeing In Rainbows used as a case study in a business school marketing class. Long story. I assure you, the art was ignored. The other common angle one hears is the binary theory, by which the listeners shuffle the tracklist of In Rainbows with that of OK Computer to create a longer, supposedly richer and more coherent album. It's loosely numerological based on In Rainbows representing 1-0 and OK Computer representing 0-1. It has no real basis, and again, it provides a handy way of avoiding speaking about the music itself. Google it if you want. The blog Puddlegum claims that, quote, someone associated with Tom York contacted them and validated their binary theory, but my theory is that they were being catfished. This episode of the Quick to Listen podcast tries to rectify the relative critical neglect of In Rainbows. You will hear no more talk of the marketing strategy or of secret track lists that unlock the meaning of it all. We'll listen through the song cycle itself, looking at its key themes, aesthetic techniques, and its spiritual outlook, as befits this show, which is influenced by both Buddhism's view of circularity and the Inferno's view of instant damnation. Radiohead's music, especially in the early 2000s, was heavily about spiritual corruption. Call it by another name, dying inside, losing one's soul, going off the rails, willingly participating in a corrupt system. Kid A, Amnesiac, and Hail to the Thief especially are populated with sinister, eerily vacant, corrupted figures wreaking havoc from positions of power. The thief, the trickster, the butcher. These figures are characterized by a grandiose self-indulgence. They allow themselves everything all the time. In Mixomatosis, the mafia-affiliated show-off has been where he liked and slept with who he likes. The electioneer will stop at nothing. The disembodied voice of sit-down, stand-up barks arbitrary orders and expects them to be obeyed because we can wipe you out anytime. In 2003, while promoting Hail to the Thief, Tom York spoke of meeting a powerful politician. Quote, "It's like shaking hands with thin air. The tornado has nothing in the middle." These figures consume other people, turning them into meat. A grisly cycle of dehumanization is unleashed by their transgressions, degrading the civilized world into an animalistic one of survival of the fittest. We suck young blood. We want the sweet meat. I will eat you alive. Don't look down, shove it in your mouth. Walk into the jaws of hell. A butcher, I feel nothing. Packed like sardines in a crushed tin box. Packed like frozen food and battery hens. Tom York is a vegetarian, incidentally, so this metaphor of meatification and literal consumption must be especially resonant for him, because he may see the meat industry as an actual atrocity that is being ignored. Big fish eat the little ones. The big fish eat the little ones. Not my problem with this song. He has applied this metaphor to the military-industrial complex, i.e. the swimming pools full of blood that are found in the Kid A artwork. The Olympic swimming pool full of blood was an actual unit used within the CIA to estimate casualties, each representing 20,000 deaths or 20,000 gallons of blood. And he's applied the metaphor to Hollywood, where vampiric producers suck young blood. What starts this terrible cycle? In a word, betrayal. Those little fish elected the big fish and do not deserve or expect to be eaten by them. Remember York's impression of a powerful politician? The tornado has nothing in the middle. In Dante's Inferno, the lowest circle of hell is reserved for traitors who have turned on those closest to them. It includes Judas and Satan himself, the fallen angel who betrayed God's trust. Dante is stunned to learn from a damned soul, that of a man who had invited his own brother to a feast and then killed him there, of the special punishment reserved for these traitors. Quote, "Know that forthwith, when the soul betrays, as I did, his body is taken from him by a demon who thereafter rules it, till its time has all revolved." Dante reflects, "Men estranged from all morality, and full of all corruption, why are ye not scattered from the earth? Found I one of ye, who for his deeds even now in soul bathes in the frozen river Cocytus, and above on earth still seems alive in body." In the medieval imagination of Dante Alighieri, if you do bad enough, your soul is sucked from your body.
Mephistopheles is just beneath and is reaching up to grab me.
Rachel Owen is the mother of Tom York's children and has been his partner since before Radiohead were signed. She obtained her PhD from the University of London researching the visual art that has accompanied The Divine Comedy. In 2003, York told Spin magazine, "While making Hail to the Thief, I became obsessed with how certain people are able to inflict incredible pain on others while believing they're doing the right thing. They're taking people's souls from them before they're even dead. My girlfriend, she's a Dante expert, told me that was Dante's theory about authority. I was just overcome with all this fear and darkness, and that fear is the thief." It's interesting how York's reading of Dante diverges from the text there. The loss of one's soul in the Inferno is not about authority. It's not done by the powerful to the weaker, although that twist on things accords nicely with Hail to the Thief. The themes that, quote, obsessed York then, of inflicting pain without knowing it, of losing one's humanity, of people walking the earth without souls, would not be going away. Prior to In Rainbows, there has been a bomb-throwing element to Radiohead's moral stance. They see wickedness and they call it out. At his more strident, York has played into this unhealthy dynamic in that he's dehumanized these malevolent figures through his portrayals of them as animals. Genetically engineered bears with Kalashnikovs, hammer-headed sharks, giant cranes, or vultures circling the dead. Even labels like The Thief tend to strip these figures of inner lives. In Rainbows, remarkably, bravely, ignores the bad guys. The record is in no way political, according to York. Quote, "There's very little anger." Guitarist Ed O'Brien has said, "There isn't a political agenda, it's being human." And it's true, every politicized song from the sessions has been moved to In Rainbows Disc 2. That's Bangers and Mash, 4-Minute Warning, Up on a Ladder, Down as the New Up. On In Rainbows proper, Disc 1, Radiohead refocus on the threat of spiritual corruption from a purely first-person perspective that is arguably more mature and harder to pull off because it denies the indulgence of externalizing one's demons, rather than a parade of satirical grotesqueries representing fallen souls, mongrel cats holding half a head. We have a sustained, interior, human-scale journey through the trials of trying to stay human. In a way, the world of In Rainbows is every bit as dark as that of the militarized, surreal landscapes of Kid A or Hail to the Thief. The stakes are just as high for the individual. When you're at the pearly gates, Mephistopheles is just beneath, reaching out. But we may miss the threat due to the intimacy of the arrangements and the softness of the imagery. Instead of jaws, knives, and sandbags, we have dancing, feathers, hot baths, and pillows. We may be lulled into the feeling that here, in this domestic landscape, we're safe at last. And that is exactly the point. The parable of the Inferno is, of course, not about shocking us with how many monsters there are out there. It's about teaching us that you and I are at risk of losing our souls without a moment's notice. York has said that In Rainbows is heavily about, quote, the fucking panic of realizing you're going to die, and that any time soon I could possibly have a heart attack when I next go for a run. With that mortal panic charging things, notice how the record balances a Buddhist sensibility that the moment is all there is with a strict medieval moral accounting. In a moment, we'll go track by track through In Rainbows, talking about the manifestations of these ideas, with particular attention paid to the tonal language, how the song uses tonal ambiguities in ways that are full of character and in full service to each song, the lyrics, and the album's overall arc. First, let's simply talk about how things sound. In Rainbows introduces a smaller, unadorned palette for Radiohead. We hear the band that popularized hair-raising complex guitar tones like this, sticking the vast majority of the time to naked plucking. We hear Radiohead choosing humility over grandness. And it is a true humility, one that opens up the band to criticism. Last Flowers from CD 2 was originally tracked for the OK Computer sessions. Would the band have let this vocal cracking effect onto that record? When In Rainbows came out, someone on a message board, not me, memorably savaged Phil Selway's comedy drums. As arrogant as that critique is, they're right that Selway is using an unusually high-tuned, low-reverb, small snare sound and is passing on every opportunity to be flashy. That's a krautrock influence at play, but it's also the most astute choice Selway could have made for this set of songs. It sounds safe, no car crashes. Ed O'Brien said that the band took its cue for a softer, more sensual sound from Tom's lyrics. That comfort on In Rainbows is where the morality test occurs. "15-Step works well as an introduction. The instruments are introduced one by one, which helps us acclimate to the album's different, smaller palette. The lyrics are stark and ask questions that apply thematically to every track on the record. The key lyric, and the first lyric, is the line implies that again and again he ends up where he started. The circularity implied by that is reflected in the music. The guitar figure and the melody have a looping quality. The beat is round in nature and so lacks a satisfying, clear end point. It just kind of keeps going, being in 5/4 instead of 4/4. And the chord change, 1-4-5-4, is very simple but is also symmetrical and looping in nature. Circularity is a huge theme in Radiohead, something that maybe I'll dedicate a whole podcast episode to. The album OK Computer, for example, begins with a car crash and ends with a guy sitting in a park saying, "Hey man, slow down, idiot, slow down." The band has confirmed that track listing choice was intentional, and the little ding that the tourist ends on is like the death of that guy in the car crash. Ding, microwave, it's all done, you're done. And then the first track, Airbag, says, "I am born again." That circle of death and reincarnation is the subtext to the album title Amnesiac, which is derived from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's a river of forgetting that souls pass down before they're reincarnated. That's for whatever. The kids' voices shouting, "Yeah," reinforces the circularity, the cycles of different generations in this case. This was an album made at the point when there were, I think, 11 kids amongst all the band members. And nothing reminds you of your mortality, I imagine, quite like having kids and seeing that the circle will continue. Now, it's interesting to note that the hand claps, the digital hand claps that comprise the beat, were originally going to be sampled children's hand claps, but the kids sounded too sloppy, so they couldn't use it. It's an insight into York's working method that he thought it was important to keep that idea of the generational gap, the kids, in there somewhere. So he has the shout now instead of the kids' hand claps. That idea of a new generation coming up is also present in Tom and Johnny performing 15-Step with the USC marching band at the Grammys. The way Tom phrases it is revealing. He's not saying, why do I end up where I started, which would demand a sort of explanation of the hidden spiritual forces at play in the universe that are making him end up where he started. He's saying, how come I end up where I started, which is, how did it come to pass that I am not making the progress that I thought I would make, that I'm being reincarnated, I think figuratively, at the same station in life that I was at before. It's that mechanical question of how it comes to be that we fail to live up to our potential, how we go wrong, that In Rainbows focuses on, versus the grand, ephemeral spiritual questions.
Used to be alright. What happened?
In a rather succinct fashion, 15-Step presents 5 different ideas about how we go wrong. It's gradual. It happens one by one, like the threads comprising a string snapping. It happens when we take our eye off the ball. It's as soft as our pillow, so it feels easy, comfortable, inevitable, and pillows suggest being asleep. The image of taking 15 steps off a cliff and then looking down and falling suggests a very serious denial involved. I know that that's the image that is suggested by the lyric 15 steps and then a sheer drop, because that metaphor is something that Thom Yorke has repeatedly mentioned in interviews since OK Computer. And lastly, going wrong, or the threat of it, comes to us all. So after the panicked melody of how come I end up where I went wrong, Thom Yorke switches to a conversational tone. You used to be all right. What happened? He seems to be talking to himself, which is the general headspace for the record, reflecting on, oh, did I go wrong there? Am I going wrong? What have I done? Why do I want this?
Used to be alright. What happened? Etc. etc.
Tom shows his droll sense of humor with the line, etc., etc. So early in the song, he says, I won't take my eye off the ball again. And then in the portion of the song where he's reflecting on what happened, why he's not all right anymore, he doesn't pay attention. He takes his eye off the ball and sort of gets bored with it in the middle of saying it, goes, etc., etc. And lastly, a note on the tonal identity of the song. I'm going to do this with each of the songs on In Rainbows. Radiohead has always played with ambiguities between major and minor. But not on every single song, and on In Rainbows, that aspect of their songwriting really comes into its maturity and is used not in moments to spice things up, but is used in ways that are integral to the arc of an individual song and the identity of the song and the lyric and the whole concept of the song. So what's happening is pretty basic in 15-Step, which is a very basic song in many ways. It has a chord change that's simply 1, 4, 5, 4. It's a minor 1, then it's a major 4, then it's a minor 5. But when the Walkman-esque shimmering guitar comes in at the lyric 15 steps and then a sheer drop, the 4 becomes minor as well, which gives an extra drama and a falling sense to the final chorus of the song.
15 steps, then a sheer drop.
A minor 4 fits at the minor 1 and a minor 5, so the song sonically locks into place and feels right in that final chorus, which is interesting. So things perhaps being bad, things being sadder, if you will, is the mode that feels more natural. Also, the song ends on that minor 4, not on the tonic, which makes everything feel unresolved and makes us want to continue listening to the rest of the story, the rest of the tracks, to figure out where he went wrong.
I do not understand what it is. I don't know.
You killed sound, removed backbone, a pale imitation with the edges sawn off. Your mouth moves only with someone's hand up your ass. Clearly, Coldplay, Travis, Muse, and the rest of the imitative post-OK Computer bands have gotten under Tom York's skin, so to speak. Well, he's never slammed a hype, falsetto-led, millennial melodic rock band by name. After completing Kid A, York remarked, "Let's hear them do this." Notice the snarling, angular edge with which he delivers this line. That there is something Chris Martin, Fran Healy, and Matt Bellamy wouldn't sing. He's asserting his independence. The idea of a malevolent alien stealing the body of a human is a 21st century update to Dante's imagining that there were demons inhabiting some human's flesh. The Bodysnatchers metaphor is perfectly Yorkian. It conveys a complicated and personally arrived at idea of his using a borrowed word from pop culture. The lyrics draw a parallel between a paralyzed person communicating to a doctor and a lost person's soul struggling to reach the surface. Is there somebody in there? Check for pulse, blink your eyes, 1 for yes, 2 for no. The eyes are the window to the soul. It's chilling. At the ending of the song, York repeats, seemingly as a mantra to ward off negative forces, just as he did in Punch Up at a Wedding. Bodysnatchers is almost too fiercely accusatory to fit in on In Rainbows. But as much as he hurls insults, York questions whether he still has his soul. The second verse is where he slams the imitators, but the bridge after it is in the first person, fading away on the line, "I'm a lie." The first verse also uses the first person. "I do not understand what it is I've done wrong." Is he speaking from a Bodysnatcher's perspective or for himself? The confusion is kind of the point. He says at different points, "I have no idea what you are talking about," and "I have no idea what I am talking about." And the bridge asks, "Has the light gone out for you because the light's gone out for me?" He's not placing himself apart from these benighted souls. He's mixing his and their identities. It is the 21st century. Neither he nor they can escape that one. Let's talk about the song's harmonic character. It begins in D major and ends with that acoustic "It is the 21st century" bridge in D minor. There are elements that foreshadow the song's ultimate shift to the key of D minor. Within the droning D major riff is a natural 6 that drops to a flat 6, and after each verse things hover on a C natural, which is a flat 7 that, like the flat 6, belongs not in D major but in the minor. Things end ambiguously. Tom's "no, no, no" vocal repeats the 6 to flat 6 pattern and then shoots up. There's a gnarly bent guitar note at the end that starts on a suspended 4, then bends down through... Playing with major and minor is standard Radiohead. The airbag riff starts minor and ends major. The national anthem bass line begins major and ends minor. But Bodysnatchers uses the major-minor distinction as a structural tool to separate the more despairing bridge from the more fiery accusatory verse, and also to foreshadow that bridge, and to end on an ambiguous note. You could say it underlines the spiritual insecurity of the song. Speaking of sounding unsettled, Nude starts on a G-sharp minor chord and then immediately goes to a G-sharp major. Don't get it. Big ideas. When the song was first played live, it included an extra verse. She stands stark naked and she beckons you to bed. Don't go, you'll only want to come back again. Appropriately, the sensual string and bass-heavy sound of the song contrasts with a message to not go with what you're feeling. That line is in the present tense, revealing that we're only hearing part of a mind divided. Note the tension created by this ascending melody and how Thom Yorke goes into his head voice, "You'll go to hell, the stakes couldn't be higher." But then as he says, "What your dirty mind is thinking," it's as if he's remembering the wonderfulness of the dirty things, and then the line backs off and becomes more gentle. Nude was written in 1998. And it's interesting to think about how it would have sat differently in the OK Computer era. There, it would have felt more accusatory. You Paint Yourself White recalls the whitewashed fences of Pearly, which criticized global hypercapitalism.
Tom, the new song you're doing live called Big Ideas, Don't Get Any. I love that title, by the way, too.
That's good, actually. I didn't have a title. I wanted to call it, I don't know what I'm going to call it. Risk that when you get a mortgage in Britain for your house, and all the adverts for mortgages and so on, they always have this thing at the bottom saying, if your home is at risk if you do not keep up repayments. I wanted to use that as the title.
The idea of an unstable household remains, but it's stripped of banking connotations and feels like much more of a simple character study here. One last note about the song. I do not get credit for this, but somewhere on YouTube there's a video of Nude being played in reverse. It begins with reversed audio, and if you flip that around, it sounds like the end of the song. Which gives the song a kinship with 15th Step, How Come I End Up Where I Started, and gives the center of the song the feeling of being this vortex that you're sucked into, where you're stuck with this tortured person dealing with their conscience.
You will become a hypocrite, you become a liar, you'll try and paper up your own cracks and your own, and everybody does it, and that's what being an adult is. And then you have babies and that's it.
That was Thom Yorke being interviewed in 1998, the same time he wrote Nude. Since then, he had 2 kids with Rachel Owen, who was his partner then too, and he wrote Weird Fishes, which, like Nude, deals with commitment. In fact, there's a clear development happening here. The movement from Nude, thinking dirty thoughts about someone other than your significant other, to Weird Fishes, everybody leaves if they get the chance, and this is my chance, to All I Need, you are all I need. At that point, the chance to leave has passed. The circularity sensibility is at play here as well. The first line is, in the deepest ocean at the bottom of the sea, your eyes, they turn me, as in turn me back to the surface, get me out of this place. And the last line is, I hit the bottom and escape. They're describing the same moment. Now the whole length of the song is charged with the feeling that it takes place underwater and that the narrator is suffocating as time goes on. He's eventually eaten by fishes, so he's dead, which gives it an underworld feel. So there's not much progression. It's about the rising tension as one runs out of oxygen, as one realizes this is my chance to get out of this relationship, but one doesn't act. The tonal identity reflects this. It's a major song, pretty much. There are a lot of suspended seconds and fourths, which give things an unresolved feel. The ending section in the bass introduces that signature flat 6, natural 6 mixture that makes things a bit more colorful, and in this case gives it some sense of progression, but it's relatively subtle. Whether it's deliberate or not, the opening to All I Need shares an ironic resemblance to the opening of Richard Strauss's tone poem Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
I'm the next step, waiting in the wings. I'm an animal trapped in your car.
Zarathustra is of course based on Friedrich Nietzsche's fable of man overcoming himself, the emergence of the Übermensch. And it was used because of those connotations in Kubrick's 2001 as ape-like cavemen ascend to the heavens. It opens in the key of C with that 1, 5, 8, dun dun, and then the portentous heavy landing with the timpanis and the full orchestra and the horns. All I Need, on the other hand, also in the key of C, opens with the 1, 5, and then a very faint 8, and then it goes back to the 1, and it just goes 1, 5 over and over again with a loose rhythm. It never transcends its earthly place, and then instead of a brash fanfare entering, a low bass line enters. This is an earthbound song that's very much about accepting your smallness, your limitations, surrendering yourself devotedly to your imperfect relationship. The lyrics are incredibly self-deprecating. I'm a moth who just wants to share your light. He's an animal trapped in his partner's hot car. I mentioned earlier that York has a habit of pointing out the inhumanity of wicked figures by calling them different types of animals. Well, here he's calling himself an animal, but he's a cowed, domesticated pet who, unlike a battery hen, is choosing to be there. Before OK Computer, with the first draft of the song Subterranean Homesick Alien, he identified with angels. They were angels instead of aliens.
Up above, angels hover, making home movies for the folks back home.
Now he's identifying with a moth. I think it's fair to feel a little uncomfortable at the ugliness of it. Speaking of ugliness, well, the song is in the key of C. It does have some interesting things going on. The vocal melody in the verse steps across a tritone. It steps across a sharp 4.
I am all the days that you choose to ignore.
You might say that that note, which lies at the center of the scale symmetrically, is lying in the leaves at the center of the song musically. It then becomes revealed in the dramatic finale as it's incorporated fully and centrally into the piano chords and fully into the vocal.
I'm in the middle of your picture, lying in the rain.
In the vocal, it underscores the unease of "it's all wrong, it's all right." That's sung with an even time value on each note, as if York is trying to be fair-minded. Of course, it's boiling over with pain and tension, which is in the abrupt changes, the drums opening up the china, strings entering from nowhere, the vocals leaping up to a higher register, climbing upwards in this melodic figure that boils over itself, the rising tension created by the glockenspiel line that ascends, and the unresolved nature of the lyrics. I think Johnny Greenwood's string choice is perhaps a device too many at this point. The song is already agonized sounding, and he wrote a part that plays every single note of the scale to create a sort of white noise, which is fully in keeping with the spirit of revealing the tritone. But I think it's a little too much since we already have all these other ingredients that are heightening the tension. The introduction of the strings does, however, transition nicely into the next song, which features strings properly.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Wakey, wakey, rise and shine. It's on again, off again, on again. Watch me fall like dominoes in pretty patterns. Fingers in the backbone pie. I'm tingling.
Faust Arp sounds light after the huge climax of All I Need, but do not be deceived, it's as soft as your pillow. The narrator is distracted, restless. The words come out unstoppably in a flow that steps over itself and interrupts itself. There's a clipped quality to the 3-beat measures. At one point, he interjects the word plastic bags, nonsensically, a word plucked from earlier in the song. Phrases overlap in a clipped fashion.
Exactly where do you get up? Is enough.
The tonal identity of the song is unsettling even. There's a lyric, the elephant in the room is tumbling, 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 and at that moment, the root note is tumbling down, doing a walk down that will land in the unexpectedly bright but totally uneasy place of B major. Which fits the feeling of the song of being in a very domestic scene, but feeling like you're falling, feeling guilt-racked, everything is wrong. But then you end up in this unexpectedly brighter but off-feeling place. The tonal language of the song is on again, off again, alternating between the completely disparate keys of B minor and C major. These keys exist adjacently but have very, very few notes in common.
Reasonable, sensible, definite.
Twice after doing this uneasy oscillation between keys, the song rests on a G major, which is a chord that does exist in both of the keys. And that's where it ends. Alfred Hitchcock said, "Drama is life with the dull bits cut out." This song is an inversion of that. We have the dull bits. Wakey, wakey, rise and shine. It's routine. Butter, bottles, plastic bags, interrupting trains of thought, smothering the drama. Slipped amongst these obsessively repeated but insignificant phrases are some absolutely cutting ones. Exactly where do you get off? That cliche phrase has a gut punch quality here in an album full of allusions to infidelity. And we thought you had it in you, but no. What doesn't he have in him? Humanity. He's stuffed full of feathers instead.
Definite makeup, I guess I'm stuck. We thought you had it in you, but no.
He's like the politician who's a tornado with nothing inside. He's like one of Dante's damned traitors. Here it is at last. He's dead, but continuing to walk the earth. Something terrible has happened out of frame. There's an elephant in the room. The title refers to Dr. Faust, the legendary figure who sold his soul to the demon Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles will appear in the album's last track, Videotape, clutching at the narrator's soul. Faust was a brilliant and respected man who simply wanted to increase his understanding of the world. He didn't want to take it over. He wanted knowledge. The Faust connection speaks to why one would cheat. Curiosity. To not be stuck in tedium, with all one needs, but not all one wants. Yet, here the narrator is, squeezing out tubes and bottles for recycling. He of course hasn't escaped tedium. As the liner notes to the Airbag EP said, "Has sex ever really moved you to a different place?" Fair enough for York to, however obliquely, equate himself with Dr. Faust. Radiohead are the band that, quote, are so good they scared York's hero Michael Stipe in 1995. They've topped Album of the Year, Decade, and Century lists. They're considered brilliant. Well, first York undercuts that by showing a slice of life filled with malaise and dread and guilt. Then, in the last couplet, he says he's got a head full of not brilliant songs, but feathers. That's humility. The feather image returns from 15 Step, where going wrong is as soft as your pillow. We also have the Tom York solo track from 2006, The Drunk Machine, in which a mindless machine spits feathers. In the Nude music video, feathers fly in the band members' faces like a slow-motion catastrophic explosion. Feathers represent the dark side of comfort. They evoke sleep, which has to do with cheating and with simply taking your eye off the ball. And they evoke hidden exploitation and death. Remember, I had to, that feathers come from dead animals. In this song, we also have a pie made from a blackbird and butter. So there it is, after all, the Darwinian animalistic ladder, just much more gently presented here than with Amnesiac's frozen food and battery hens. There is something sexual and transgressive about sticking your fingers in a blackbird pie, and the tingling comes from doing something new and crazy, or the dislocating feeling of being found out. That said, I don't think that ultimately In Rainbows is about infidelity. It's about trying to stay engaged, keeping your eye on the ball, being a decent person, staying true to yourself, and infidelity is a perfect metaphor for that, especially given the apolitical nature of the record. After the cycles of guilt and self-laceration and fear of going off the rails, there's relief in the idea of a reckoner coming and ending it all. Reckoner, take me with you. Tom York has said that the song was inspired by an amazing dream that he didn't want to end. And it has a dream-like eternal quality to it. It fades out and it begins seemingly right in the middle of things, If you listen really closely, there's faint guitar underneath the rhythm tracks at the beginning before the guitar audibly enters, and that guitar is off by a measure from the guitar once it enters. So not only is the guitar figure itself one that cycles without a clear beginning or end, but it actually comes in the middle of itself. Tonality has free-floating, ambiguous qualities to it, but we can consider Reckoner to be in E minor because the vocal melody continually returns to E. In its bridge section, Reckoner flirts twice with turning major. As the strings swell, it falls chromatically from a G-sharp minor, which would identify the key as E major, to a G, which brings it back to minor. A song called Reckoner promises final judgment, and the narrator says, "Take me with you to some other place, to the afterlife," and he succinctly states his worth as a moral creature dedicated to all human beings. But it counts towards the circularity of In Rainbows that the song could be looped and it fades out and it just keeps going. Another reiteration of circularity. There will not be some final moment that relieves you of your responsibilities as a human being. Let's talk about the album title. There are different theories. One theory is that In Rainbows refers to the rainbows that followed the biblical floods. There are no references to floods in the text of In Rainbows, but they were all over the previous releases, Tom York's Eraser and Hail to the Thief. So in a sense, this is something that's coming after the flood. But I think that's a little bit of a stretch. The title appears in the lyrics of Reckoner during the enigmatic bridge. Tom York sings it in a very drawn-out way where you wouldn't know he sang it unless it was printed in the lyrics. He sings it beneath the line, "Because we separate like ripples on a blank shore." Now that is a dangling clause. We don't know the what to the because. But it seems to connect to the word In Rainbows. Within white light, if you separate out the waves, you get the colors. And I think that is the connection that York is drawing. There is hidden beauty and life and color within the seeming sad, inevitable separation of people and things. The title In Rainbows is synonymous with In Light. Of course, if Radiohead had called an album that, the spiritual connotations would be moved to the forefront and it would detract from the listening experience and it would be less artful. That idea of darkness and light and hell being dark and being physically separated from the light of heaven is not just a general Christian trope. It's specifically in Dante's Divine Comedy, where the farther you go from heaven, the deeper you go into hell. So I think it's a positive declaration, not unlike the phrase dedicated to all human beings. In Rainbows, York is identifying with the light. Darkness does creep into certain songs on this record. The Night Owl comes out at the end of Jigsaw Falling into Place, and there's a voltage spike which would result in a blackout in House of Cards. In both of those cases, infidelity is happening in the darkness. On the album's final track, the narrator's life is being watched at the pearly gates on videotape, and videotape is red, blue, and green, which the song points out, so that's a technological, Radiohead-esque synonym for rainbow. His life is in the red, blue, and green. His life is the sum of his actions. And I imagine the band liked the wordplay of In Rainbows resembling In Limbo. Limbo is the shallowest circle of hell. The subtitle of the song 2 + 2 = 5 The lukewarm refers to those people in that circle of hell, so there's another Dante reference. But also, In Limbo is the first song that Radiohead recorded during the Kid A sessions, which themselves were a form of limbo. So it's a sort of counterbalance to that, I believe, representing the positivity and the freedom of the sessions. Hey, there's the key of E major. The next song, House of Cards, has a very simple harmonic character after Faust Arp and Reckoner. The chords are beautiful played on guitar with unusual inversions, with seconds and sevenths adding color, but fundamentally the song is very static and simple. It goes from 1 to 2, 1 to 2, and from 4 to 1. That, along with the key relationship to Reckoner, creates a feeling that we're home, okay, we can relax now. Which is perfect because this is a song about This is really a song about cheating. Underneath the sweet tones are the lyrics, "Throw your keys in the bowl, kiss your husband goodnight," an allusion to a swingers party. "Forget about your house of cards and I'll do the same with mine." York's focus on the act of throwing your keys in the bowl is very in Rainbows. It asks the question, where do we go wrong? Is it with the cheating, or with the throwing the keys in the bowl, or with the having previously committed to someone in the first place, having built that house of cards, because a house of cards can't stand forever. President Jimmy Carter was famous for saying that he thought that even thinking about another woman represented an act of infidelity. Those are the exacting standards that the narrator of Nude holds himself to. He'll go to hell for what his dirty mind is thinking. House of Cards draws our attention to how the little act of throwing keys into a bowl can result in a catastrophic, or at least very dramatic outcome for one's relationships. That idea is driven home in Jigsaw Falling into Place. The construction of the first verse seems to be in the form of an answer to the question, where did you go wrong? Where did things go off the rails? Things inch closer and closer to their inevitable end.
Just as you take my hand, just as you write my number down, just as the drinks arrive, just as they play your favorite song, as you're about to disappear.
And the title lets us know where things are going. Jigsaw falling into place, things falling into place, a bit of a sexual image. However, that title also can be seen as connoting things being sawed apart, things taken apart, because a jigsaw puzzle piece is what actually falls into place. The jigsaw is the thing that cuts the pieces apart. And that image of separation is where we leave things. Regard each other as you pass. She looks back, you look back. The two people end up walking off into the darkness, and they can feel a light on their backs. The song craftily sets the expectation that things will continue to escalate before the lyrics even begin, through the wordless vocal part that goes ooh, and then it gets bigger, ooh, and then it gets more elaborate, ooh. It grows. After all of the lines about pillows and butter, here seems to be where the dark heart is revealed. There's the saw, and there's also a sawed-off shotgun. He hollers, "Come on," and let the words out of that sawed-off shotgun. So this is a narrator who feels pent up, and he's sexually pent up. He's flirting with a woman. There appears to not be a consummation, but there also appears to be some horrific loss that's occurred. He feels the light at his back. He's walking away from the light. It's as if he's betrayed someone, as if he's damned. In the pantheon of unsettling Radiohead songs, Jigsaw Falling into Place is up there with A Wolf at the Door, Like Spinning Plates, Street Spirit, Fitter Happier, Climbing Up the Walls.
Wish you were
The song's huge climax, Wish Away the Nightmare, works because the album until now has been full of lyrics about denial. And now the person is realizing that they're in a nightmare and they can't deny their way out of it. It's an uncompromising picture of human suffering. Remember, the song began with taking someone's hand, simply wanting connection with someone. The song's tonal character fits the metaphor of pieces falling into place. It starts in the same key as Faust Arp in B minor and makes a chromatic slip a half step down from a B minor to a B flat minor, which is a chord that has no place in the key of B minor, so the pieces are not fitting. Then we get a D major 7, which fits back into the key of B minor, and then a turnaround figure on the flat 6 and the 5 of the key. The song loops on that chord change over and over again, creating a claustrophobic feel, which, combined with the various other mechanisms by which the tension is ratcheted up, makes it a cousin of Weird Fishes. With Weird Fishes, the tension was ratcheted up as the character was staying with the significant other. In this, the tension is becoming unbearable as they are straying from their significant other. So it goes. We can take that range as evidence that In Rainbows has its sights on deeper, more universal questions about how we find contentment. It's not about doing the right thing and staying with your partner. York was getting at this when he talked about the panic, realizing he could drop dead any moment on a run.
When I'm at the pearly gates, this'll be on my videotape.
On Jigsaw Falling into Place, as the characters are threatening to go off into the night and hook up, becoming comatose from alcohol, blind even to their own actions, there's still the night owl, something that can see through the dark, looking at them, and there are closed circuit cameras. That may have struck you as a religiously flavored metaphor. Even if you're blacked out, your actions are being watched. They're counting somewhere. Well, that immediately pays off with Videotape. Do I think that Tom York is Christian and is expecting to be greeted by St. Peter at the gates of heaven?
No.
He's expressed in interviews a much more universal, even non-sentient conception of God. I think the value of the setup of Videotape is how it reminds us that all of our actions count. And a videotape is such an impersonal thing. We don't get to choose what of the things we did counted. That's why it's so important to keep our eye on the ball.
Mephistopheles is just beneath, and he's reaching up to grab me. This is one for the good days, and I have it all here in red, blue, green, and red, blue, green. And you are my center when I spin away out of control on videotape.
This is a tremendously sweet, optimistic song that shows York trying to communicate his worldview regarding these important things as clearly as he can. In fact, he breaks the wall at one point and addresses us directly. After all these images on In Rainbows of being separated, of being at the bottom of the sea, of being behind glass in a hot car, of being reeled out, of ripples separating on a blank shore, it's very powerful when he says, "You are my center as I spin away." So even if he's spinning away from his loved one, there still he is saying, "You are my center." From which I get this: we can't always be there with someone, but we can choose to make them our center. Since this is Radiohead, where even the smallest details are considered and laced with meaning, the music itself is both centered and spins away. The right hand on the piano plays a 3-note looping figure, and the left hand on the piano plays a longer looping figure. It's a 3-measure pattern, so there's a circular roundness to all of that, cycling over and over again with no clear beginning. You might even say it's reminiscent of the spools on a videotape turning and turning. There's heavy use of pedal tone, and it's sonically centered around A major. It doesn't depart for a section B. The spinning away, interestingly, was executed in completely different ways in the 2 versions of this song that exist. There's a 2006 live version that's full band, and the drums kick up, and it becomes quite dynamic at the end. The sections are the same, but it spins away energetically and dynamically from the same soft opening. The studio version spins away with these digital effects that come in a little bit out of sync with the beat. We need our great artists sometimes to salvage our cliches to make them live again for us. Today is a perfect day. Live in the day is a cliche, but there's wisdom to it. I'm about to play a remarkable moment on In Rainbows. Tom York is about to go into a preoccupied, distracted vocal style like what predominates on Faust Arp. I'm talking to you before, and he's about to say, I'm talking to you before it's too late, which also would rhyme with videotape. That's how you subconsciously know that's where he's going with that lyric. Now, that's a loaded line, before it's too late. That's talking about death, that's talking about judgment and regret. He cuts that off. He doesn't even let himself go there.
This is my way out, saying goodbye, 'cause I can do it face to face. I'm talking to you before, no matter what happens now, you shouldn't be afraid, 'cause I know today has been the most perfect day I've ever seen.
No matter what happens, even if damnation happens, he won't be afraid, because nothing can take away the good things that have happened, and that includes the good thing that he's allowing to happen right now. He's siding more with the Eastern live in the moment sensibility than the Western moral accounting sensibility. As proof of that, the song does not end on a triumphant cadence. It pulls back dynamically, and it should be ending. The lyrics have ended, there's really nowhere for it to go, and then it picks up again, which is much like the final section on Reckoner, a way of communicating sonically that life just keeps going on. I hope I've helped you appreciate how much thought and wisdom Radiohead put into their work. I want to say this as an epilogue. Tom York is a class act. There is great art that is made by assholes, but by all indications, York has been living the wisdom of In Rainbows. He's shown an astounding ability to command the loyalty of the people around him. He's been with the same woman since college, which shows us that the sky will not fall if we express doubts about our long-term relationships, that, as the album suggests, there's harm instead in denial. So he's still with her, raising kids, and he's still with the same 4 bandmates that he was with in high school. He won't say it, but I'll say it. I don't think Thom Yorke has to worry about being so treacherous at any point that his soul will be sucked from his body and sent into the 9th circle of hell. It always could happen, but it doesn't seem to have happened remotely so far. I think because of the moral vigilance that is exhibited on this record. Thom Yorke is pretty good at being in the moment, and that counts. I'm going to play audio from a 2003 Toronto performance in which Thom Yorke halts the band during myxomatosis and stops the crowd moving so that security can get to a fan who started having a seizure during the song and get him safely out.
I don't know why I feel so tongue-tied. Don't know why I feel. Stop. What's going on there? What's going on? This guy's had a fit, all passed out. His eyes have gone over. Get security, get an ambulance, and get him out of here. Third verse. My thoughts are misguided.
Of course, anybody would do that to save a fan from being trampled, but you can only indeed be so good if you are in the moment enough and sensitive enough to your fellow humans to see that suffering person. This has been the 10th episode of Quick to Listen, a podcast about how musicians make meaning. I'm your host, Grant Valdes. Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. Look up the archives at qtlpod.com. That's qtlpod.com. We've got interviews with some really interesting folks and more interesting interviews to come. Thank you for listening.